there, Alex here. The OPPO Reno8 Pro is a device that I've been interested in ever since it was first announced. It's finally coming to Singapore and I've been using one for a while now. So in this video, I'm going to share with you guys what I think about the phone. First of all, this is a really good looking and premium feeling phone. And I don't mean just for a high-end mid-range device. This looks and feels like a flagship device. It's not just the metal and glass construction, but also the little attention to details that sets it apart. Like how the metal frame rises slightly to match the camera bump, how the back panel is a single piece of glass that has been contoured to incorporate the camera bump, and even the haptics feels pretty good. The front of the phone is pretty much the same story. It has bezels that are slimmer than some flagship devices I've seen. I like the flat display, the colors look really nice, it has decent enough brightness for outdoor use, and it has a 120Hz refresh rate. Though for the refresh rate, some apps will drop down to 90Hz for some reason, but it's not really a huge concern since the difference between 90 and 120Hz isn't really that big to me. It's still a great looking display for everyday use, media consumption, and even the occasional gaming. Of course, the inclusion of a set of decent sounding stereo speakers definitely helped. Unfortunately though, the position of the optical fingerprint sensor is still a bit lower than I would have liked, but it is fast and accurate. In terms of performance, it's using the Dimensity 8100 Max, and it's a chipset with good performance and power efficiency, so it has no issues handling day-to-day tasks and less demanding games. However, when it comes to Genshin Impact, it wasn't quite what I was expecting from this chipset. OPPO seems to be limiting the performance in this game to keep the heat and battery consumption lower. At the highest graphics settings, average FPS is around 45, and I'm still seeing some stutters every once in a while, likely when the game is loading something heavy. FPS is also kept at around 50 no matter the graphics settings. I've tried different performance settings, turning on high performance mode, and even the auto adjust resolution settings. It just doesn't go any higher. The plus side of this is that the phone doesn't really get too warm and consumes less battery, but I feel like it's a bit too conservative considering how well this chipset performed on the OnePlus 10R while playing Genshin, and the battery drain difference isn't even that big. I can understand wanting to keep the phone running cooler, but as someone who's used to playing this game at 60 FPS, it's pretty annoying. It would be nice if I could turn off that limitation. After all, if the phone needs extra cooling, I can just use an external cooler. I'm hoping that this is something they will change eventually with a software update, because I know the chipset is capable of doing better, and I'm really hoping that this isn't because they're trying to make sure this phone doesn't outperform the Find X5 Pro by too much. Anyway, this doesn't really matter if you don't play Genshin, since it's still able to handle other games with ease, and it is still a more efficient chipset with better thermals and battery life. Even though the Find X5 Pro has a larger 5000 mAh battery, I'm still seeing slightly lower battery drain on the Reno8 Pro with just 4500 mAh. So personally, I'll still take the Dimensity 8100 over the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 any day of the week. Anyway, the phone doesn't support wireless charging, but comes with 80W fast charging, and the 0 to 100 time of around 36 minutes is somewhat decent. The Reno8 Pro is running ColorOS, and while some folks might not be a fan of the slightly heavier looking skin, I personally think some of the customization options and features are quite useful, and the design looks pretty decent too. Some of the new features like the air gestures aren't particularly useful for me, but I still love their reachability feature. That said, I do wish that there was an option to turn off Google Discover, and less bloatware would be nice. But overall, like on the Find X5 Pro, I think it's still a pretty decent user experience overall. The camera hardware on this phone is just okay, considering that it doesn't even have OIS. But it does have the same Silicon X imaging NPU found in the Find X5 Pro that helps with image processing. This is perhaps a great example of how image processing matters more than hardware, because camera performance is actually better than the OnePlus 10R, which has a similar camera setup on top of having OIS. Nice looking colors, Auto HDR works well, and it's a pretty hassle-free camera to shoot with for the most part. Even in low light, camera shake seems manageable. Even for 4K video recording, the electronic stabilization performs quite well in good lighting. The only situation where I felt like having OIS would be nice is when shooting videos in low light, but that's not something that I recommend doing anyway since video quality is not great. The Silicon X NPU does help a bit in this situation, but there is only so much that it can do. For the secondary cameras, not much to talk about here. The ultra-wide camera is usable in good lighting, but the macro camera is just kind of pointless. But on the flip side, the front-facing camera is pretty great just like on its predecessor, and now comes with autofocus. It performs really well in most lighting conditions. The only downside is that video recording is limited to 1080p. Overall, camera performance is not mind-blowing, but it's more than good enough for everyday use. If you want to see more camera samples, feel free to check out the link in the video description below. So to sum up my thoughts, I think the Reno 8 Pro is a really nice device for the most part. I've really enjoyed using it, and I actually like it more than the Find X5 Pro. Part of it is down to the underwhelming performance from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, but I also prefer the flatter design, especially the flat display. It does have its compromises like I've mentioned, but most of them are probably not going to be deal breakers for most folks. The only thing that could be a concern is the lack of an IP rating. I know it's not a foolproof rating, but some sort of assurance would be nice, especially for a phone at this price point. I do want to mention as well that there are cheaper options out there with similar specs if you're not as particular about build quality, design and camera performance. And when it comes to playing Genshin, some of those options actually perform better. So I can't say that this is the best value for money. But what I can say is that if you don't care about Genshin at all, and you're willing to pay a bit extra for the premium design and better camera performance, the Reno 8 Pro could be a pretty nice option. Thanks for watching this video, and see you guys on the next one.